Hello and welcome back to Radio Free Urbanism. I am your host, Alex Williams, and today I am joined by some terrifically lovely people. I'll introduce the regulars first. We've got Nick Laporte with us.
Hello and welcome back, everybody.
And we've got Ethan Myers with us.
Welcome back, you beautiful people. It's so wonderful to be here.
And, you know, originally I wasn't going to be here today, and we had to find a replacement for me, but then the replacement was so good that I was like, you know what? I better do my darndest to make sure I'm here, and that is John Simmerman. Welcome onto the show.
Hey, thank you so much.
Yeah, so if people don't know, John Simmerman, he's the host of Active Towns and works down in Austin, and honestly, around the world. You kind of go everywhere and do everything to make towns more active. Do you want to, at the beginning here, we'll get into some questions later, but maybe give us like a high-level brief bio about who you are and what it is you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm based in Austin, Texas these days. I've been here for about a decade, and really my career stretches about 34 to 35 years now. Started out in disease prevention and health promotion. I'm a classically trained scientist that then also started to apply a lot of health behavior and psychology to that as well. So I've been in the trenches working with people, trying to create healthier lifestyles for them. And then about 15 years ago, really started to shift my focus on community design, the built environment, and how that can encourage healthy, active living. So the Active Towns initiative sort of grew out of some studies that I had been doing with individuals, highly active individuals, actually Ironman distance triathletes, back in the 2012 time frame. And so in 2013, I launched the Active Towns Initiative, and then that sort of morphed and evolved into a media venture, including a podcast as well as a YouTube channel, right around 2021. And yeah, now I'm full-time producing content to try to spread the word about what communities are doing around the globe to transform their environment into healthy, active places.
That's great. I love that. And I think it's something everybody can acknowledge, is that our built environment affects us in a variety of ways. And I really like that you take the approach, especially coming out of like health sciences and approaching our built environment like that. So yeah, if anybody in the live chat, which is open for Patreon subscribers, I know we've got Jen and Skitch in there right now. If you guys have questions for John throughout the show, throw them in there. We will be asking some questions after we go through kind of our discussion and stories here. But first, we're going to start with an update from Nick.
Oh yeah, I start first? Okay.
Yeah.
Right, I finally finished my series about biking around the Netherlands, or around Holland, or this very specific area, as the Dutch people in the comments are very, very sure to point out to me. But it's just like a relief. Oh my God, I felt so rushed. These videos are not as good as I feel like I could have made them, but I just wanted to get one out a week, and I did it, and I'm done. I'm so glad. But then you guys make content. You finish it, and you're like, okay, I can breathe. And then as a couple hours pass, like, okay, gotta start on the next one. Here we go.
Yeah. There's another thing to do.
Yeah. But if you haven't watched it yet, please go check it out. Give me honest feedback. I need to know so I can make better content in the future.
It's really well done, and it kind of it plays a little bit like a vlog, right? Like you're telling this really great story, and you're talking about urbanist principles along the way. And so I think you have the opportunity there to actually reach out to a few people who might be new to these ideas, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe just thinking about traveling to the Netherlands, and might learn a thing or two along the journey.
Well, this is it. I asked my wife, I asked her first, okay, if she would watch it with me after I had finished it all, because I hadn't watched them yet. And she said, yeah. So we watched the whole thing. It's about an hour and 10 minutes or something, all 6 of the videos. And along the way, she was like, wow. And then at the end, she's like, crap, now I want to move there. It's like, yes, let's go.
Yeah.
We'll figure it out. But yeah, I am going to release a bonus video. It's just basically going to be all the stuff I left on the cutting room floor, certain topics that I kind of left out of videos for time's sake, and goofs and gaffs or whatever that I felt like didn't really fit for the flow of each video. And that will be on my Patreon exclusively. It will be free, but it'll be early access for paid members. for like a week. Or
Nice.
so you can subscribe for free and you can watch it eventually if you want to. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nick the Door at Patreon.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Perfect.
Exciting stuff.
That is super exciting.
Can I jump in and say something about that? I mean, because I was going to talk with Nick about this anyway. So the fact that you guys brought it up, Nick, congratulations. I mean, the 6 videos, the series was fantastic, and I did everything I could to help promote that as well. My question for you is there anything that just really struck you as being like, interesting or surprising, especially like when you went back and did the editing?
Oh, back when doing the editing was probably when I saw most of it, because when you're there, like, it wasn't my first time in the Netherlands, but it was my first time seeing it through this urbanist lens, and coming back and finally looking through it all and being in this context back in North America. I know I'm in Vancouver. It's definitely one of the better places for urbanism, but every day going to work and then coming home and working on my videos and stuff, that juxtaposition was really astounding. And it's a bit sad, but I think just the seeing the people, the types of people on the daily basis. Everybody rides in the Netherlands. Everybody, any type of demographic, you will see on 2 wheels, and that is the biggest difference. Even in here in Vancouver, you will see them occasionally. You'll see people on cargo bikes, long tails, actual front-loading cargo bikes. You'll see people with electric scooters, all sorts of micromobility devices, but generally, it's people who look like me, generally, like, for the most part. It's, men, middle-aged men for the most part. I'm getting close to that age, but yeah, young or middle-aged men is like the majority of people. So I think that's the biggest difference. That really, it lets you know, like, this is a safe place when you can get everybody to participate in active transportation. Yeah.
And you caught a little bit of a tiger by the tail too, because we were talking about this before we hit record. Is that your channel just exploded once these started going out?
Yeah. It's just, it's something about the Dutch. They just love watching their own country. I think most of the viewers are from the Netherlands.
Well, it's not. I mean, it's nice to see your own country be praised like that, right? Like, oh my goodness, look how beautiful it is. The people are wonderful. The things they do are great. I want to do things like that where I live. I think that always garners a lot of pleasure from people.
Yeah.
Alex, I would even say that what I have heard over the years of producing content from the Netherlands too, is that sometimes they're actually thanking us for like profiling it from the context of they don't even realize what they have is so special because they're fish and water.
Yeah, that's absolutely the case. A lot of people in the Netherlands, they're like, oh no, it's really nothing. I'm like, no, like, you don't know like how nice this is. It really is wonderful. And we are going to get into that a little bit later on, because we've got some questions lined up for John already. And we'll talk a little bit too about Nick's demographic, the mammal sort of demographic, and maybe how we can expand that cycling culture a little bit away from the sporty athletics. But in the meantime, let's jump into the stories. Ethan's got a bit of a tale to turn for us.
Yeah, so this is a pretty quick story, folks. This news comes to us out of Portland, Oregon. It's a little bit of a transit story, as I've been kind of, dubbed the transit expert on this show, apparently. But it comes to us from the agency of Trimet. They recently just completed a project called the Better Red Project. And what this does is it extends the Portland Trimet Max line from the Beaverton Transit Center all the way out to Hillsborough Airport. Now, this doesn't exactly do a whole ton for the system in terms of actual, serving new communities, but what it does is it improves the communities it already serves. So if you can see that red line extension there, that is frequency with that red and blue, where frequency has been upped to 7.5 minutes for trains coming by rather than every 15 minutes. So trains are going to be more frequent through this little corridor, and it's going to be easier for riders who live along this corridor to get to Portland's airport, downtown, and other destinations that are along the red line. So nothing too crazy, just improve transit, and they mostly did this through improving signaling on the corridor. So it is quite exciting to see this. Anybody who lives in this area is really going to feel that improvement, especially getting to downtown. Frequency is one of the most important things when it comes to transit. The less time you have to wait at a station, the better. 15 minutes is kind of the bare minimum for a lot of people. A lot of people don't really want to wait much more than that. Even then, 15 minutes is kind of wait for a lot of people, but 7.5 minutes is a lot more doable for a lot of people just trying to, get to their destinations throughout the day. So hopefully this short little corridor extension will make things just a little bit more viable for commuters in this area who have to get to and from work or, to and from areas that aren't their job, entertainment, things like that. And hopefully we'll reduce car dependency in this area a little bit more.
Yeah. And is this, Ethan, this improvement in frequency, is this an all-day frequency improvement, or is this like rush hour frequency?
So this is all day. So this is going to be,
wow.
Whenever Trimet is running the Max Light Rail, this is going to be the new Red Line. So Red Line trains are going to continue on this route the entire time. This map just shows kind of the new little portion dotted out there that's being extended onto. So Maps, actually, Apple Maps has already updated it. Google Maps is a little bit behind on it, and I'm pretty sure the Transit app is pretty solid as well on getting this upgrade in there. But it is... Yeah, it's an all-day fix, so hopefully, it leads to higher ridership on Max. They've been struggling a little bit post-pandemic, and, every agencies are trying everything now to get ridership back up to pre-pandemic levels, and hopefully a little change like this can go a long way.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of the time when we talk about transit expansions and extensions and things like that, we're often thinking about like capital projects, right? We talk about like these big new train lines and some snazzy things that have some fancy ribbon cutting ceremony and stuff. But a lot of the ways in which we can improve our transit system is with these little adjustments like this, saying, okay, actually we're going to like up the frequency a little bit. We're going to increase the hours of operation. Those little dial twisting things that do cost money, but significantly less than building a whole new route. These things, they're huge deals. So that's exciting to see.
Yeah, it was on the more expensive side. I believe this was like a $200 million project, but a lot of it had to do with resignaling and, station upgrades and stuff like that. But, it really is just the improvement of the existing network. And Max does have a fairly comprehensive network. I believe it's actually got more trackage mileage than SkyTrain. But unfortunately, the land usage around stations just isn't very good, and ridership just needs to be better on this system. So making changes like this that improve frequency go a long way towards that. Now, of course, they should invest in a big capital project, that being digging the tunnel under downtown, but, anything for right now is good.
Yeah, this is a start, so that's pretty exciting.
How much of this is like Trimet? Is this just basically Portland? Or is it actually...
so this is not Portland. This, I believe, is Beaverton and Hillsborough. So it's just outside of the main, it's like just to the west of, Portland and everything like that. But these are still...
Okay. Yeah.
It's still important to get, riders from areas that aren't actually in the city itself to ride.
Absolutely.
And, I mean, projects like this are going to be good for the network as a whole. I mean, 7.5 minute frequencies. Anybody living in this little area that's just to the west of, Beaverton, or downtown Beaverton, is going to be able to use it. If you're taking trips just in this local area, it's going to be a lot more of a feasible alternative to, driving. With halved frequencies, you don't have to wait for a train as long, and it just makes it much more convenient to catch a train no matter which direction you're going in this corridor.
That's fantastic. Yeah. We've talked about this so many times on the show, just having that frequency. And I think this is a big part why people like trains over buses. Obviously, there's different parts to that and just stigmas, but frequency with rail seems to be a lot better in many cases. Obviously, that's more complex than just saying, hey, we're going to put more trains more often. But that's why if I'm like, I'm going to take the SkyTrain, I'm like, yeah, I'll just show up whenever. And it's fine because I'm never going to have to wait more than, 5 or 6 minutes in Vancouver, at least during, busy times. But then the bus, you kind of have to look it up. I usually look it up because I'm not sure.
Yeah, buses can get confusing. There's multiple lines, and it just really, frequency isn't as, shown off for different lines either. A lot of agencies have problems showing off, the frequency of when buses are running. A lot of agencies have this issue, but some have found ways around it through like showing frequency through line colors. But regardless, buses are still a little less, at least in terms of transit, appealing than the actual permanent infrastructure that you get with even light rail. I mean,
Yeah.
people are just more likely to take it if it's built in, if it has its own dedicated right of way to some extent. If it feels permanent, it's got a smoother ride. It gets around that stigma that buses have.
Yeah, and a lot of the time, I mean, growing up, we weren't like a big transit using family. But if we went downtown, or to the university or something else, we would take the C train, and we'd never really check the time because the frequency was high enough that you show up and you might have to wait a little bit, but you show up and then you hop on the train and you go. Whereas if you have a bus that has a 30-minute frequency or a 45-minute frequency, or even worse, a 1-hour frequency, right? Like you're not going to be beholden to that, right? You're going to want to have some sort of park and ride, right? You park at the train station and you hop on the train. Whereas if you have buses and other services that come at these much more regular intervals, it's so much easier to just like, yeah, I'll just walk out there and catch the bus, right? And so, yeah, these frequency improvements, that's a big deal. So that's really, really exciting to see. Any other thoughts on this, John? Do you have any big transit thoughts? I know you're an active mobility kind of guy, but obviously you think this is good. I hope you don't want less frequency on the trains.
Less frequency. No more frequency. No, I mean, in fact, Nick can also, attest to this, is that one of the really wonderful, magical things that happen in countries where we have really good transit, really good frequency, and Ethan, you sort of alluded to it here, is that you have to have the land use right around it as well. The magical Dutch combination is the bike train combination, and the fact that they have dialed it in so well with 40 to 50, sometimes 60% of their ridership of their on the trains, of people coming to or leaving from the stations on bike. So much so that they can't allow, especially in rush hour, they can't allow people to bring their bikes on the train, and therefore they need to have a system of bike parking at their major stations, like in Utrecht and the couple of new stations that have been built there at Amsterdam Centraal. Other countries, they still allow you to bring a bike on the train, or if you travel the way I do with a folding bike, a Brompton, it folds up, it's small enough and go right underneath my seat on the train. That's a magical combination when you really think of it, because suddenly you have a 9-fold increase in your catchment area with each of those transit stops versus, the catchment area of somebody walking to or from the transit station. So yeah, from an active towns perspective and from an active mobility perspective, to really get transit, especially rail transit like this, to sing on all levels, it's not going to be a situation where it's a park and ride situation. I mean, if you're leaning in towards the park and ride situation to try to make your light rail system or your rail system work in North America, you're going to be diluting that potential of what you could have in terms of a denser, more vibrant environment around each of those stops. So that's my take.
Yeah, I think that's a great take. It also, like, having a denser area around those stops can improve safety because you have eyes on the street, you have people there. It's not just an empty parking lot, a wasteland that you have to police. I think there's a lot of great opportunity for that, and also using bikes as that last mile solution. I know Patrick and Jasmine on the Urbanity, they did a great video a while ago, I think, talking about the way that cycling can increase that catchment area for any given train station, because it really, like, the train station nearest my house is 30-minute walk, but it's 10-minute bike ride maybe, right? And so I think that's great. But with that, we'll move on to the next topic, kind of story, that Nick was wanting to discuss here. Do you want to lead this discussion, Nick?
Yeah, this has got my brain spinning a little bit. So this was interesting. This came up on the Fuck Cars subreddit, and the title of it was Carbrain's Thoughts on Lack of Free Parking, in which they showed a photo of a tweet or something. Maybe it was on Facebook. I don't know. Anyways. And the title of it says, 2 places you should not have to pay for parking. 1, the university you attend. And 2, the hospital. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. And what proceeded was, to me, a bit perplexing. Because in the comments of this thread, it was very much in support of free parking at hospitals. And I went, that's weird. I thought this was fuck cars. So, I've talked about this a bit before. I used to work in medicine. I used to be a paramedic, right? And my wife works in medicine. I have lots of friends who work at the hospitals. Now, I know this is going to be different in different places, but it really irks me to think that we're defending free parking at a place where most of it is going to be used in ways that are not good, okay? And this is very complex, right? This is very complex. And I understand there's edge cases. There's people who are coming to the hospital for certain reasons. You can find exemptions for that. But for the most part, hospitals should not be offering free parking. Okay, let me tell you a story. I got a friend. She works at the Children's Hospital nearby. And she's worked there for 8 years. For 8 years, she did not pay for parking. It's a paid parking lot, but she did not pay for parking. She was stealing parking, and she was complaining to me for getting a parking ticket. And I was just like, you've been stealing parking for 8 years, and you're complaining about one parking ticket? That's like it's nothing. It's nothing. And I always hear the same things too about, what about the poor people? What about the people who are the orderlies? You know, they're coming from very far away. They can't live close in Vancouver. It's too expensive. We need to have other options. You know, a lot of places will offer alternatives. If you decide not to park, we can offer you a transit pass or something like that, or even a rebate if you bike to work. There's other ways of getting around this. It seemed crazy to me to see so much support for free parking for universities and hospitals in this thread in particular. Anyway, what do you guys think about this? Should we have free parking?
So I know that I would be talking out of my ass on this subject. So I'm going to turn it straight over to John, who I know has opinions and has well thought out opinions on this one.
John also has the well thought out opinions, except for he has a great opinion on this, but universities, I'm going to voice my opinion here. You can cope, take transit, bike to university. You're a student.
Yeah, most universities do have better transit access.
That is true.
Than most other institutions. So yeah, universities and hospitals, I feel like those are two different cases.
Oh, 100%.
As well. But John, what do you think?
Well, it is an interesting concept of both of these. Oftentimes are major institutions. Sometimes they can be integrated within the city. For instance, here in Austin, we have both the hospitals and the university hospital, as well as the university itself, integrated into the downtown area of the city. One of the biggest pet peeves that I have with the hospitals and the medical districts that tend to pop up around cities is that they are so often very, very hostile places to anybody not in a car. And so, and to me, that was always very, very ironic. I mean, I did research in cardiology at the University of Michigan hospital system there, at the University of Michigan there in Ann Arbor, where again it's a combination of university campus and also hospital. But it's mind-boggling to me that institutions such as this aren't really thinking things through to the point of we do expect our employees to be able to get here, hopefully by not every single one of them driving, because that would increase the amount of parking demand, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But also thinking about it from the standpoint of the people who are coming to visit the medical center and or the hospital. One of the more encouraging memes that Chris and Melissa Bruntlett have posted there in the Netherlands near Delft is that concept of being able to ride your bike to a medical appointment. and seeing how they, give preferred parking and really, really nice covered parking to the people who are visiting, let alone, and also the employees of the hospital itself, because you've got a two-pronged side to this, both the people who are working there and also the people who are visiting there. It is interesting too, because sometimes even the Dutch have a little bit of a blind spot of like thinking through this and trying to encourage active mobility. For instance, one of the medical centers that I profile in a future video, which will be coming up soon on the channel, we actually go to a hospital, we go to a medical center, and we talk about how, the employees have this nice indoor parking, similar to like what we were talking about with the train station, but then the people who are visiting the hospital, either for their own appointments and or to visit somebody who might be in the hospital, they end up having to park out in the elements, out in front, and they get, and as we were panning around with the camera and demonstrating, it was completely full. They needed more parking. They all of a sudden the bikes were being parked everywhere where they didn't want them parked. And so I think it's a really, really interesting sort of blind spot that hospitals and medical centers, have of assuming that everybody's going to get there by car, and then having, a self-perpetuating, process of leaning into that and embracing it, and then you get what you've designed for. And so it's really kind of ironic and really kind of sad, especially because hopefully these types of centers, which should be thinking from a preventative standpoint of trying to encourage more active mobility, and fewer people arriving by car. So shifting gears to the university real quick, I just got through profiling last week the Colorado State University in Fort Collins, Colorado, which just had amazing infrastructure throughout the entire campus, and they're doing everything they can to incentivize staff as well as students as well as visitors to the campus not to show up with a car. And so when we think about behavior change, and again, that's my background, we have to do two things. We have to really make it convenient and comfortable and attractive for people to use that mode, that active mobility mode. And then we have to put in place some friction, some resistance to making it so easy that you just get in your car and drive there. And so, paid parking is a big part of that. That's a little bit of friction, especially if it's priced at a market level that starts to get people thinking, maybe I should ride my bike or take transit or walk to get to that destination.
Yeah, I like what you're talking about, kind of carrots and sticks. And I think carrots usually play better with people, right? Like make it worth it for them and make it easy for them, right? Yeah. Like make it super, super convenient. While you were talking, I was kind of thinking about the hospitals that I'm familiar with. Not that I like hang out at any hospitals, but I'm going to share my screen here, and I'll be curious to hear your thoughts, all three of you guys, but especially John, on this hospital that's nearest to my house and that I pass by regularly using transit. So here is the Rocky View General Hospital here in Calgary, and we've got a couple parkades here. This newer parkade up at the front here. Let me see where my cursor is. There we go. So this newer parkade here up at the front, and then there's kind of an older one back here. As far as transit access, this is a bus lane here that comes by this transit way, and there are a few different buses that stop there. Two of our BRTs stop there. There's one bus that also does a loop up in here and actually goes up. This is an elderly care facility up here, and it loops right up to the front door and right up to the front door here of the hospital. And then for cycling access in the back here, this is mostly used for recreation, but there is a multi-use pathway that goes right behind the hospital here. So I was kind of like, okay, here's something, but I don't know if I biked there. I don't know where I would park my bike. And also, it isn't one of the BRTs that goes straight to the front door, which, especially if you're a person receiving care, might be something that you're relying on. Yeah, how would you rate this? Like, what would you say as far as the work that the city and the province and AHS have done on this access here?
Yeah, I mean, my take on this, just at first glance, is that this is a place that is catering to and really built for people to arrive by car.
100%.
And even if it is technically possible, you certainly don't feel like it's being incentivized and in creating a welcoming environment for people to take other modes to be able to get there. And you mentioned the carrots and sticks, and one of the key things, if you're striving for community behavior change, is the fact that you can't really employ the sticks effectively until you've really made the carrots attractive.
Right.
You have to be able to make it, something where it's clearly evident that, oh yeah, and by the way, if you don't drive, if you ride a bike, or maybe you're an elderly person who can no longer drive, but they can ride an adaptive cycle or an e-assist bike, and you need to get to the hospital, you need to get to there to visit a friend or even have an appointment or whatever. Oh, by the way, we've got this wonderful, very wide, very comfortable shared use path that'll take you away from cars and deliver you to our back door. And when you get there, we've got a wonderful covered parking structure for you. Honestly, you don't have to have a huge structure just for bikes. You can just kind of repurpose a handful of the spaces, and you've got enough for a couple hundred people to park bikes, fairly easily.
Yeah.
In other words, you're really leaning into making it convenient, making it comfortable, and welcoming people to use an active mobility mode rather than driving straight there. But yeah, it looks like a beautiful campus, especially on the backside. Access to nature. I could totally see that they probably have walking paths there. Thumbs up to that. That gives a little bit of a greening aspect to it. But yeah, the front side of it just screams cars.
You get here by car. Yeah, I think those are some really valuable insights. I especially appreciate what you said about needing the carrots in place before you start activating the sticks, because I think if you just try to activate sticks right off the bat, you're just going to piss people off, and you're also going to make it more difficult for them to access the amenities they need, right? Yep. Because you say, well, I made it more difficult to drive your car there. Why aren't you biking? Well, because I don't have a bike lane. I don't have like the other things that I need in order to do that thing. Like you just made my life more difficult in general instead of actually doing something that provides options for me.
And if the stick happens to be a monetary stick, then you run the risk also of doing something that's quite inequitable to people who are less able to afford it. For somebody who is well-heeled and that increase in parking isn't going to, bother them at all, it may be an irritation, but it's not going to, make them rethink even going to that doctor's appointment.
Right. Yeah. I think that's some fantastic insight. Nick, you've got some thoughts there.
Yeah, it's again, if you've ever read the great parking books, the high cost of free parking, it all comes back to that. About this is a subsidy. If you're offering free parking, no matter where it is, doesn't matter where it is, it's a subsidy. And it comes back to this one video I made about bike streets here in Vancouver, or I always air quotes bike streets, because they're not. They're just literally streets where they put a sign that says bikes, but there's cars. And somebody said, oh, well, there's a school nearby. That's why it's so busy with cars. And I was like, it doesn't matter. It's still really busy with cars. It doesn't matter where they came from. It's still busy with cars. And it's discouraging people from using it, especially the kids who could be biking to work or to school, right? And this is the same thing. It doesn't matter. I know it's like emotional, and it's kind of comes back to that whole survey. I know CGN covered it, and it's something I've always loved. And it's the biggest one to me was, how do you feel about people smoking in public places versus how do you feel about people idling their car in public places? Completely different results, even though it's basically the same thing. Yeah. And this comes back to that. This is a very emotional thing because people are thinking about the hospital. I'm in an emergency situation. Maybe I'm visiting a dying loved person. And that, I think, plays into this whole discussion and why people feel strongly about this and why on the Fuck Car subreddit this went so sideways, in my opinion. But I think one person in here had a good comment. I'm going to read it here. Flying_trash can. I love it. Parking decks are not cheap to build or maintain. Someone is paying for the parking. It is either paid for directly by the user or subsidized by everyone. Free parking encourages more trips, which encourage more car-centric infrastructure. This sub is called Fuck Cars. And I was like, yes, that's it, right? So, again, okay, I want to pose a question. So here in Vancouver, like I said, there's literally a bike lane that goes right by the hospital. There's two of them. They intersect. There's great transit access. It's a short walkway from a SkyTrain station. But let's say you're in the middle of Texas, right? You're like John is, maybe not in Austin. Austin's a bit different. I don't know. What's a hospital like in Austin? Is it similar to what they have in Calgary?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So does that make a difference?
Even the downtown hospital, attached to the university, even that was it. They have the automatic assumption that everybody's going to arrive by a car.
Yeah. So does that change the argument? Do you think that changes the argument between somewhere that might be, let's say even a place in the Netherlands, because I know they have paid parking at their hospitals for the most part. Yeah. Does that change the difference if you already are in a car-centric place versus an urbanist paradise, so to speak, whether or not you should be charging for parking? What do you guys think? Any thoughts?
I like what that comment said, that we're paying for it regardless. And of course, in the United States, you're paying for your healthcare through your insurance or out of pocket, and so you're going to see that bill, right? You're going to see the bill, and it doesn't have a specific line item that says, covering the $50,000 to cover the cost of the one parkade stall that you used. But you're still paying it, right? Like that's tacked on because the hospital has bills they need to pay. And then in Canada, we might not see that bill, but that comes through in our healthcare costs as well, right? We pay for that through our taxes. And so regardless of whether it's the user or the taxpayer, paying for that parking stall, it is being paid for by somebody, and it is being paid for by you. And I think that's the real thing that we need to hit on. And I also want to include that what John was talking about the equity statement, right? If you're charging too much for that parking stall, it becomes an equity issue. But no matter what, as a society, we are still paying for that parking stall. Regardless of how much you're paying at the ticketing machine.
Gold, Alex.
We're all paying for that.
Gold. Perfect answer. I love it.
No notes.
No notes.
No notes.
Any other thoughts before we move on to the next bit here?
I do want to say one thing. Nick, I heard you about 5 minutes ago. You stuttered when you said children on their way to work, school. Yeah. Do you still support child labor?
Only if it means my sneakers can be cheaper.
Yeah.
Oh,
just kidding. Obviously, I'm sorry.
Oh, we're done for, folks. Radio Free Urbanism last episode.
It's over. Pack up your bags.
I don't wear Nikes. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Well, hey, you know what? That counts for something.
Yeah.
Nick's got another story today. I guess he's realized how little he usually gets to talk on this show because
it's actually
myself and a little bit of Ethan, we just yap on.
Yeah, we're just the Yapatron 9000s over
When
here.
I edit the audio version of this podcast, I can see it in waveform. I'm like, oh yeah.
I know
Alex
every
definitely
time
talked the most.
Every time I edit it, I'm like, yeah, I'm the only guy who talks here. Sorry, guys, I apologize. My sincerest apologies. But let's keep going. We got this this topic to touch on, and then we're gonna get into some questions with John here.
This is a perennial topic if you ever dive into the comments of anything that has to do with bicycles. So yet another study says rolling stops, aka Idaho stop, it's a good thing. So this is coming from the Oregon State University, found that allowing bicyclists to treat stop signs as yield signs does not lead to unsafe behavior from cyclists or motorists. The research, led by Professor David Hurwitz, used a novel method that linked separate bicycle and motor vehicle simulators, allowing participants to interact in a shared virtual environment. So basically, they go on to say there was no increase or real detrimental effect to safety. It didn't change much, but it made people feel differently. Cyclists like it. They felt safer. They felt like they could move more, and drivers didn't have any negative effects. And what they did say is that what this needs to be accompanied by, if you were to implement such a law, is just information, education, to let people know that it exists and how it works. Yeah. So I'm sure you guys have definitely seen, it's the classic comment. There's a bicyclist ran a stop sign. Oh my God. All the time, right? So I've made a video about stop signs in Vancouver because there was a CBC spot with a police officer, constable, I can't remember his name, from Vancouver, basically stopping cyclists at a stop sign and being like, hey, you don't run stop signs. You got to be safe. Meanwhile, the vast majority of our injuries and deaths in the city happen from drivers, often breaking the law, including running stop signs and red lights. So it was a little odd to me. So I dove in and did some research. I found that, at least in my small research window, was that drivers and bicyclists run stop signs about the same rate. However, I've also found many studies like this one showing that either it's not more dangerous or it's, in many cases, safer to have cyclists run stop signs because they pass through this intersection quicker, which means less time spent in the intersection, less likely to have a collision.
It's also nicer for drivers because then the cyclist gets to maintain at least a little bit of that momentum. Drivers aren't subject to that same experience of like losing your momentum and slowing down completely. And I will say, I have filmed several intersections, several four-way stops, and it's the drivers seem to only stop when there is a reason to stop, which is exactly what the Idaho stop says.
Yep.
If I'm on my bicycle and somebody is at the intersection before I am, they're obviously going to have the right of way. And if that means that I stop my momentum, if I stop as a moving object and I let them through and then I keep going, well, then I just stopped at the stop sign. But if there's nobody there and I slow down, I look both ways, I check, I make sure it's safe, because of course I'm going to make sure it's safe. I'm a sack of meat on two wheels, guys. Like, I'm not, like, I promise you, I am not blowing through any stop signs. I do not want to die. But yeah, so I think this is like an important thing to note. It doesn't mean cyclists never stop at stop signs. It doesn't mean cyclists don't have to stop at stop signs. It means cyclists do basically what drivers are already doing, making sure it's safe before proceeding.
Yeah. Simple as that. It's a very simple thing, but it's always a sticking point. It's just always coming up over and over and over. And I know I've already made a video about this. Didn't get a ton of views. I'm going to make another one eventually to really hammer it home so that anybody, like if we're talking in like a subreddit, at least in my local subreddit in Vancouver, that people could be like, here's a video, watch this every time they say it, just so like eventually the word gets spread. Because, certain things are getting spread. I feel like we've talked about this, how the idea that one more lane, right, is not going to fix traffic. I feel like that's one of the things that is getting through the brains of even normal people who aren't steeped in urbanism. So I'm hoping the stop one is another one that also ends up there.
I would love for it to. Unfortunately, there's just this like visceral hatred that you can feel towards the cyclist model, and a lot of that comes down to just how cycling culture has kind of adapted itself in the US, kind of being this very almost fringe thing to, the main sort of American cultural mind, but it really has come down to this like visceral hatred of what the like standard cyclist is and how they're always breaking every road rule and everything like that. It in the more normal, mainstream line of thinking towards cyclists. I say normal. It's not normal. It's the most abnormal way you could think about something.
Yeah. But you're totally.
It's weird to hate cyclists as much as a lot of people do.
It is. It's weird to hate anybody that much, honestly.
Yeah.
It's weird. People will go sociopathic. You guys all know this. People will just
Yeah.
straight up go like full evil mode.
Oh yeah, yeah. John, what do you think?
Yeah, so obviously we're touching upon behavior here quite a bit, and so again, the Winnipeg Bike Mayor that helped host that protest there, it's a wonderful demonstration to the fact that the last thing in the world that drivers actually want is for every single person who happens to be sharing the roadway with you as a person on a bike to follow the letter of the law, to the nth degree, because if you do that, the whole system just kind of breaks down. And Nick can vouch to this, is that one of the wonderful things that we see in the Europe model of this is they really kind of see a stop sign as being an admission that we just effed up the street design in the first place. We hardly ever see a stop sign in the Netherlands of any kind for bikes or for motor vehicle drivers, out on the roadways, because the streets are designed so that you're moving slowly so that you can make decisions at intersections and be able to proceed through them. I personally just absolutely detest stop signs, and I pretty much employ the Idaho stop, the Colorado safety law stop, whatever you want to call it, all the time, even when I'm in here in Austin. And since I film a lot of on-bike footage and content and put that out, I hear about it all the time. The point that I try to make from a behavior standpoint and also from a physics standpoint is that a person on a bike is not a car. It's more closely aligned to a person walking. I like to call it pedestrian plus. That's what Chris Bruntlick calls it. We're pedestrian plus. We're not moving that much faster, ideally, than a pedestrian, especially in a mixed environment where we also have pedestrians there too.
And your mass isn't that different either.
Exactly. And the mass isn't that different, especially in comparison to a motor vehicle. I mean, we just saw on screen here an urban arrow roll by, and that would certainly, in another cargo bike, that would certainly have a higher mass than just a normal bike, but still nowhere close to what we're talking about with a motor vehicle. So being able to proceed with caution, treating a stop sign as a yield and treating a stop light as a stop sign is the modus operandi that I operate under all the time. And I just spent 2 weeks in Colorado, in Boulder, and it's a delight to ride around there because you realize just how car brainwashed we are of treating ourselves, when we're walking and biking in our communities, as if we're in a car, and we're not. And you have to use good judgment and at the same time not put yourself in harm's way. But from a behavior perspective, it's way safer over there where those laws don't exist. And it really makes a big difference in terms of just the number of people doing it because, again, less friction. You're making it an easier, more enjoyable, more pleasurable, more pragmatic experience of being able to get around.
And I'll add too, and this is something Nick has mentioned on the show before, it's also a more comfortable way to drive. Like the Netherlands, driving in the Netherlands, walking in the Netherlands, biking in the Netherlands, using transit in the Netherlands, it is all a better experience than what we're doing here. Yeah. And so what we're talking about isn't about like giving cyclists some special place on the road that makes them really special and unique and gives them all this special treatment. What we're talking about is just improving the way we move around our cities, no matter what way you choose to do that, really.
And the history for the United States and probably also for Canada too, is that the hangover effect of Forester and the vehicular cycling movement, where the mantra is, you do follow the letter of the law, to the law. You on a bike are, serve best when you behave as if you're a motor vehicle, and you're driving your bike in that situation. And that's just kind of the mantra that, that they were, really putting forth through the 80s and into the 90s. And it really set us back because they also were protesting, having protected bike lanes. So I'm so glad that era is, for the most part, dead and gone. Ultimately, though, one of the most important things that all of our cities around the globe can be doing is really bringing motor vehicle speeds down to non-lethal levels. That 30 kilometer per hour number is magical because it's really that tipping point. Any speeds, higher than 30 kilometers per hour, you start looking at your serious injuries and fatality rates going up with an exponential number. And at that rate and lower, it's a not only is it less traumatic and less lethal, but the crash doesn't even happen. The collision doesn't even happen because they're going slow enough that you're able to maneuver. They can actually brake in time or divert. That's the absolute beauty of what we are seeing when we look at successful places from a Vision Zero safe systems approach, is bringing the motor vehicle speeds down, hopefully not through enforcement, hopefully through design.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. Yep. I think we talk about it a million times about the importance of design and the different behavior that invites, right? Yeah, that's great. Nick, you're stewing something?
No, I completely agree. It comes down to design. I mean, that's what I talked about in my video. I was like, this is a Band-Aid fix. We need to fix our intersections. Absolutely. But I think we should get to the questions. We're getting long in the tooth here. I don't want to be long, right?
Yeah.
So I've got just a quick question, and I love stories about where people came from and why they got into this stuff. So I'm just wondering, John, what's your watershed moment? What was the catalyst that brought you in and said, hey, I'm going to start Active Towns and begin this journey?
Yeah. It's a rather interesting story too, because it was about halfway through my career. Again, since I've been around for 30 plus years, older than dirt, it feels like. About halfway through, I made a career move and a life change move from Boulder, Colorado to Honolulu, Hawaii. And I thought, yes, cool. I'm moving to a place where I can, be active all year round on my bike. I don't have to worry about snow and ice and all that kind of fun stuff. I'm moving to paradise. I showed up in Honolulu, Hawaii, and it was just hell. The streetscapes there are just so bad, and everything has been built up. It's a line in the song. They paved over paradise and put a parking lot, and multi-lane highways and highways through neighborhoods, and it was really, really tough. I got so depressed that I sold my bike. I was actually registered for Ironman Canada up in Penticton that particular year. Okay. And I just withdrew. I got a little bit of money back, sold my bike box, bought a surfboard, spent all my time out in the water. So if I had free time, I was in the water. I did that for a year and really, stewing on this whole concept of just how hostile it felt out there. I was still running a lot. I ran the Honolulu Marathon that year, but even running just felt like you were putting your life at risk. A job opportunity came up that got me off of the island of Oahu and Honolulu and over to the Big Island in Kona. Which is where the Ironman Distance World Championships is held. And so I got re-engaged with riding a bike, re-engaged with triathlon, bought another bike, but immediately started to connect the dots between what I had been doing in my career of creating environments that encourage healthy, active living. And most of that first 15 years of my career, I was doing this for large corporate campuses like IBM and Motorola, big, huge companies. In the United States, most of these large employers are self-insured. So every single heart attack that happens hits their bottom line, their profitability. Every single high blood pressure, every single cancer, you name it, all hits the bottom line. So again, I had the first half of my career designing initiatives that were considered healthcare cost containment initiatives. The add-on effect to that, though, was that they were also created a culture and an environment where people wanted to work there, because it was just like, hey, we've got this wonderful amenity that we have here. We've got a fitness center and a wellness program and a jogging path around, and we had locker facilities for people who did commute by bike and be able to, shower before, they got to work, et cetera, if they were riding a long distance, et cetera, et cetera. But making that connection, that watershed moment of moving over to Hawaii, seeing, oh my gosh, compared to Boulder, where I'd lived for a decade prior to there, and going, okay, it's the built environment. This is really, really important. And from there, I slid into the urbanism and built environment, active mobility, deep dark hole, and I've been existing in that ever since, and really have established myself as one of the subject matter experts, in quotations, experts. You're always learning. You never know it all. But somebody who really has a good understanding now of how we need to transform our built environment so that we really are encouraging people to live healthy, active lifestyles, and not even thinking about it. Because if you have to think about it, it's even kind of like, then it seems like it's a workout. But if it's just natural and people are encouraged to do something, get on the bike or walk so they can use public transit or get to their destination, then you're there, because then you're making it so pragmatic and practical for people that it just becomes second nature. And that's the habit formation. We want to be able to make it pleasurable and convenient and comfortable so that it becomes a routine, so that you get that habit formation in place. Otherwise, we just do what we do now, most of our society, which is reach for the keys because it's so easy to do. Mm-hmm. And you have that habit formation. So that's a watershed moment. It was a move. I moved from Colorado to Hawaii.
I'd love to see an animated version of that, where you're cycling around in the mountains of Colorado, and then you turn up to the airport and you think, I'm going to Hawaii, like, see you later. As soon as the snow starts falling, you're on the airplane, and as you're walking out of the airport, the automatic doors open up, and it's just like parking lots and highways, and some palm trees in the distance.
Oh my God, I can see it in my head.
What have I done?
I felt like that. For sure.
I really like that. We've got a few kind of big and interesting questions that we want to get into here. But first, I want to double check that you're good for time. You don't have to rush off anywhere.
I'm good for time.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Ethan, do you want to take this next question from Jen?
Absolutely. So one of our wonderful viewers in chat, Jen Hall, has asked, in your latest video, during your on-bike interview with Ben Addy, Ben mentions how it's easier to get people on board with low car traffic streets by emphasizing improvements in community building and safe play spaces for kids. Then he adds that once bikes are mentioned, that's when people might get turned off. How do you personally encourage people to entertain the idea of low traffic streets? Do you tactfully minimize mention of bikes like Ben?
Yeah, I mean, my rule of thumb is that anytime we can make our tent as broad and wide as possible, the better off we're going to be. And in fact, I even advise, don't even try to hone in on any particular infrastructure and saying, well, this is going to be great because it's going to fix ... whether it's public health or climate change or anything else. I mean, really, the broader and more broad-based that you can make an infrastructure play, the better. Really, when you look at what we're talking about when we're trying to create more people-oriented places, and in that particular video with Ben Addy, that's exactly what we were talking about. We're trying to decrease the amount of the negative externalities of high-speed cars going through a neighborhood, a community, where there's residences everywhere and small little businesses and shops. And so applying a modal filter which allows people to walk and bike through there and access their homes and access these businesses. It's a win-win-win all the way around, and it does us a disservice if we present it as being, oh, this is cycling infrastructure. And one of the biggest challenges I have with that I challenge people on who push back and say, well, but it is cycling infrastructure. And it's like, well, then what is a cyclist in your mind? Almost always they come up with, oh, well, it's that dude, it's the guy in the Lycra and the sports cyclist that's going through here. Or it's, fill in the blank, or it's some other stereotype of who a cyclist is. Where I really come at it is this is about all ages and abilities infrastructure so that people can get to their meaningful destinations without having to drive a car. And that might mean somebody in a wheelchair. That might mean somebody in a mobility device. That might mean somebody in, on an adaptive cycle that they don't have the ability to walk long distances, but they can certainly, cycle on their adaptive cycle, trike or bike, etc. So really reframing what even that means. What is a cycle? What is a bike? Is part of it. And really kind of framing these things as, these are wonderful, wonderful installations. And when you guys get a chance to see this video that Jen's referencing here, you'll see exactly what we mean. These are like places. These are people-oriented places. They're not considered traffic infrastructure, bike traffic infrastructure, mobility infrastructure. These are places. So that's, and yes, do I intentionally try to frame things in such a way? And the answer is yes, because I don't even see them as bike infrastructure only. I really see them as part of an overall initiative at making places more attractive for people to be able to get to their meaningful destinations or just to go out for a roll or a stroll.
Yeah, I like that, and I like to picture these as pretty local places. Recently, I mentioned on Threads, I threaded about about building better infrastructure, about building better cycling infrastructure, and I said, like if you wouldn't let your 8-year-old use this infrastructure, like you messed it up, you did it wrong. Because cities are meant to be for everybody. And are we supposed to just keep kids cooped up forever, right? Like, are we not supposed to give them any independence until they're 16 and have their driver's license? And now suddenly the world is yours. I think before that, it's really important to allow for this. And somebody responded and they said, well, but people, those are for transportation and moving quick and things like that. And I think shifting our focus away from, I ride my bike as fast as I can to get the places where I need to go, and shifting that focus a little bit, because I'm not a car, when I'm riding my bike, but I'm so used to riding my bike on the road with cars that when I'm on my bike, I feel this pressure to go as fast as I possibly can and just like work myself up into a sweat, instead of saying, like, I've got a really nice opportunity here for some comfortable exercise, to enjoy the journey a little bit. The hospital we showed at the beginning there, I'm a regular user of the multi-use pathway that goes in behind there, right? To enjoy that space. And so, yeah, when you're talking about these community spaces and it not being necessarily for cyclists, it's for people. That's kind of what I'm envisioning is a space that everybody can use, that isn't pressuring you to go fast. It's encouraging you to enjoy the space instead.
Yeah.
Is that a...
Yeah, I was going to say, too, one of the biggest challenges that we're starting to see is now in some of our cycle networks where you look at, some of the longer distances that are being done, and we're even starting to use and apply car brain terminology to some of our cycle networks, calling them cycle superhighways and things of that nature. And it really sends a message that, oh, well, this is like a highway. It's long, straight, and it's meant for going fast. And that can be incredibly intimidating to an older adult or a very, very young child, or the parent of a very young child. to think that, oh, they're going to be riding their bike on a highway where it's incredibly high speeds. And so I also send the message within the Active Towns, world, that there's a lot of context sensitivity that we have to have when we're users of these spaces, and we don't want to be our own worst enemy of like treating people who are moving slower than us as an irritation, whether it's a person who is in a wheelchair or is walking, or a child trying to get to school and they're using a protected bike lane. And so ultimately, we as people who are able-bodied and maybe want to go fast, we need to like slow the frick down and realize that that's not the right place for hammering down and going fast. There's plenty of opportunity to do that, trust me. The other thing that is really important that you just brought up there, Alex, too, is that we do feel that pressure when we are riding in an environment where we've got cars all around us, that it's like, oh my gosh, I have to keep up. This is like a competition. And if I'm not like on it, then I'm not going to survive this battle that's taking place out on the streets. And I noticed that last week or the week before, no, it was last week in Denver, where we were actually riding on a really nice brand new protected cycle path, two-way cycle path on Broadway, which is a massively wide street, and there's just, you got the noise and the pollution of the cars and everything. You're on a protected piece of infrastructure, but it still doesn't feel that relaxing. You feel like you're sort of anxious and you're on edge because even though you've got a protected facility, you still feel like you're in it. We turned off of that and went into just a really quiet, tree canopied residential area, no infrastructure whatsoever, but it immediately felt more relaxing. Your stress level just melts away and you go, I can breathe now. And so there's a lot to be said about, duplication of quote unquote network, and really looking at that true understanding that we can have shared space, and as long as it's low traffic volume and low motor vehicle speeds, it could actually be considered an all ages and abilities network. And Nick can vouch for me on this, is that about 60 to 70% of the Dutch network is actually some form of shared space, whether it's a Fietsstraat or an undefined access road, where the street design encourages slow motor vehicle speeds of 30 kilometers per hour or less, and you're sharing space. And it's quite comfortable most of the time. And I think that many other cities need to be able to, embrace that concept, but at the same time, like what we talked about earlier, speed's the key factor. We need to get motor vehicle speeds down and motor vehicle volumes down. Nick, this was your first time visiting the Netherlands. Were you surprised that it wasn't just all protected bike lanes everywhere?
No, I wasn't. No, this is something I'm very focused on. I haven't made a video specifically about this issue, but I've said this in some of my videos before, and not necessarily these Netherlands ones, but it's these local streets should be the backbone of a AAA network. And it's the biggest gripe I have here in Vancouver, is so many of our bikeways are just, like I said already earlier in this episode, they're the same as the neighboring streets that aren't bikeways. There's nothing different. And I catch cars with my speed gun going 60 kilometer per hour down a 30 kilometer per hour street. They're not designed for that speed, and it needs to be changed. So yeah, that should be that is the backbone of a safe network. And I was very happy to see it in practice in the Netherlands. I talked about Fietsstraat, different type of lanes that they use, like edge lane roads, or just like your local streets that are brick paved. Like that's the stuff that the safe network's made of. It's amazing.
Yeah. And to be clear too, the Netherlands isn't some sort of Shangri-La, and they didn't just magically get here. They worked hard over many decades to get to where they are today with this. And the other thing that I wanted to mention on that too is that, like in the case of the edge lane roads, many of their edge lane roads are very much non-compliant with what they feel is appropriate. I've been on some edge lane roads in the Netherlands where I just felt like my life was being,
I came across bad ones too.
They're pretty bad because sometimes they'll throw it in there and it won't be a low speed, low volume street. It could actually be 50 or 60 or more kilometers per hour, and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm on this like a little thing. And it almost always works out well simply because of the driver behavior and the fact that they're used to seeing people on bikes there, but it doesn't mean that it's not scary. And I have talked with many Dutch parents, and they're like, oh yeah, no, we wouldn't take that route. There's another duplicate route. There's and that's one of the things that I like to emphasize is that the magic to these is making sure that you have multiple options. Yes, you could take the protected bike lane over on that main arterial road over there, but there's also another more comfortable route that you can take that's parallel to that.
Even in the Netherlands, route planning is a very important part of having a nice bike ride.
Yeah. And this is something we come back to over and over again is options. Yeah. Options, that's the key to a good transportation system, both in what kind of transportation mode you're going to use, but also in the route that you're going to take with that mode. Go ahead.
Yeah, just more options is always better when it comes to getting anywhere. And cars have those multiple options, but when it comes to making multimodal cities in North America, we're kind of slacking, to say the least.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to read us this next question. This one ties in to what we're talking about with active mobility and transportation. Skitch says, most urbanists agree that kids should be able to walk, bike, or bus to school, whether it's a school bus or public transit. According to Safe Routes Partnership, the Safe Routes Partnership, in 1969, approximately 50% of children walked or biked to school. These days, that number is much lower at around 15%. What are some realistic things city officials, school officials, and parents could be doing to give more kids in North America the option to walk or bike to school? She kind of gives an example here. Skitch says, one example is the bike bus, where parents and teachers lead a bike ride to school that picks up kids along the way. However, this approach is, of course, not one size fits all. So, what do you think? What can we do to actually encourage better mobility options for kids headed to school?
Well,
I think.
Sorry.
Let's go with Ethan. Ethan has been shockingly quiet.
I think one question we have to ask first is, how did we all get to school?
I took the school bus.
I biked and I took the school bus.
How did you get to school, John?
So I lived on a ranch way outside of town. And so I would either catch a ride or take the bus. As I got older, I might walk along a narrow country road into town.
Okay, nice.
Or bike. But the bike option, it was so narrow of a road, and the cars were traveling quite fast, so it was a little limiting.
Right. Yeah. I don't think I ever biked to school. My schools were all a few neighborhoods away, so I wasn't able to bike. But yeah, it was all bus. There was always a school bus to take us to school, and I'd be curious what the mode share is now. But John, do you have any insight on how we can improve that mode share, or maybe on some areas that are actively improving that mode share?
Yeah, I mean, the number one thing is we've got to get the infrastructure. It has to be safe for kids to be able to walk and bike to school, period, full stop. Has to be safe. It has to be inviting. It has to be something where parents really feel as if, I'm not worried about this happening. I'm not worried about my kid, getting mowed over by a driver, ironically, probably an impatient other parent, trying to get their kids to school. And so you've got to get the infrastructure right. There's a whole other side of this that has transpired over the years, where parents are no longer really trusting their kids to be able to even leave their sight. The helicopter parent syndrome that takes place. The very first episode when I came back from my European trip, I was over there for 2 months, was with Lenore Skenazy, the author of Free Range Kids. And she's now co-founded a group along with Jonathan Haidt, the Let Grow organization, and really talking about how to encourage childhood independence again, and the ability to be able to explore and learn and get to places under their own power. So I like to talk about it in the Active Towns terminology of, we've got the activity assets that are both the hardware activity assets, it's the built environment, it's the pathways and protected bike lanes and trails and pools and all these types of things that encourage healthy active behavior. That's the physical built environment, that's the hardware. And then the software, to me, is really kind of everything else. It's the policies and the programs that are out there, and it's also the soft stuff of, how are we as a society, sort of encouraging and educating, people to be able to activate the hardware, to be able to actually use the sidewalks and use the bike lanes that we're building. And so a part of this when we're dealing with children is both. You've got to have a really safe environment. Now, the creative stuff that's happening right now is both the bike bus activities, the walking school buses, these types of software engagement activities that try to encourage the habit formation of getting to school under one's own power. Sam Balto has been on the channel a couple of times, and we've talked a little bit about just how powerful it is getting a group of kids together on bikes, rolling, and parents too, rolling to school, basically doing a little, a kidical mass of taking over the street and getting to school. Now, he'll be the first to tell you that this is just a strategy to try to address the fact that it's not safe for the kids to bike there on their own. But that's the goal. That's ultimately the awareness that we're trying to do. You see my shirt, Streets Are for People. We're trying to encourage that reframing of what we're thinking about in our societies, to realize that our streets are in fact for us, for people. And we need to take that back, and we need to make the streets a safer, more inviting environment for everybody, especially our children. Children should be able to free range around their community. And so that's a huge thing. The other really creative thing, which is more on the hardware side, is what we're seeing right now in many of the side streets that are servicing schools in Paris. They are really going into the school street program of where they're just shutting down the streets. And so I've been able to publish a couple videos about this concept of making those no-car zones, transforming those streets in front of the schools into like little miniature extensions of the school campus. And what's really, really cool about that, when I was in Paris in June, I popped in on a Saturday and on a Sunday and shot some video of just families and kids having a ball in this street that used to be through traffic for cars and is now an extension of their school. School's not in session, but they're kicking the soccer ball around. They're having a fun time. There's all sorts of fun stuff painted on the asphalt. I'd love to see more and more schools do something like that. I'd also love to see more and more schools depave. And so one of the things that we saw in that particular Paris example was they integrated a lot of green infrastructure, because one of the biggest challenges that we have with global warming right now is we're seeing just that heat island effect on these streets, especially around these schools. And really we're kind of subjecting these children to these extreme heat situations. So yeah, making the streets around a school safe and more people oriented, using that term again that we were talking about from the segment with Ben Addy, is huge. And so there's really no place for cars right in front of a school, period.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that, especially that, a lot of these cars in North America, you can't see kids over the hood. And that's like a serious issue. We can appreciate that cars can be good tools for getting around our city, and also appreciate that they've gotten a lot bigger. They've gotten a lot bigger and a lot more dangerous for everybody that's outside of them. And the people who spend the most time not in a car are kids.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we want to encourage their access to.
I want
to
to
the
also
world.
mention something. I just noticed that Jen had talked a little bit about what the distances of getting to school, because not everybody can literally live within walking and biking distance, or
Yeah.
maybe they're walking distance, but maybe only biking distance if it were safe to do so. The ranch that I grew up on, like I said, it was outside of town. I could literally walk to school if I really wanted to. It was only a couple, 3 miles. She had mentioned like a 5-kilometer bike ride each way. And that's one of the things that I've been documenting over the years about the Dutch. As they get into their upper grades of their schools, they also travel farther distances. And it's not uncommon for them to travel a 10-kilometer distance one way to one of their upper level schools. And sometimes it's in the next village over. Well, the great thing about that is there's almost always a separated, safe bike path that maybe cuts right through the middle of farmland or along a canal that helps connect to that next village. And that's one of the things that I think North America could really do, is because oftentimes they do have the right of way, and they could easily, do just a really nice, completely separated, multi-use path that could accommodate both people walking and biking. And it's a great way to get to school for sure.
Yeah, and Jen adds as well. It was better than taking the bus, especially in the morning. I was the first one on, and it took an hour to get all the other kids living on acreages and farms. So kids experience the same issues that adults experience with buses, which is sometimes it's a milk run, and you're picking everybody else up. But cycling or being able to walk to school provides this additional independence. And frankly, potentially a time-saving option for.
And mine was
for
the
kids.
opposite. Was the opposite. I was close enough to get into town relatively quickly when I was on the bus. But yeah, it was a horrendous hour-plus bus ride all the way back home.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's a great insight. We do want to move on to our last question here, though. And this one actually comes from Jen as well. Skitch earlier called Jen the question queen in the chat, and it is very, very true.
It's factual.
It is factual. This last question here, Nick, do you want to read that one for us?
Yeah, this is from Jen Hull, like you said. Your city has decided to allow a new small business to open up on the block you live on. If you could choose, what type of business would you like it to be? Who wants to take it? Who's going?
I'll take it
All right.
first. I'll say a bakery, because I love baked goods. There is a bakery not too far from my house, and it's a local bakery. It's called Good Bread. Really, really good cinnamon buns, and I tried their ham and Gruyere croissant the other day, which was absolutely incredible. So if they opened up on my street, I would be spending a lot more money there. But even on the days when I don't buy anything from them, I'd get that sweet bakery smell wafting over into my house. Windows open all the time, doesn't matter the season. I think there are many benefits with having a bakery on your block. John, do you have one in mind?
It's similar. I mean, whenever you have an opportunity to put like a third place in, some place that you could look to and say, oh man, yeah, you got to go down to the corner here. We've got this really great place where we can get, an espresso, a really nice baked good. We can kind of hang out, meet up with people. Literally in the video that Jen referenced earlier with Ben Addy, the opening scene, we're there at one of these, amazing cafes where I had lunch, and I was like sitting at a table, out by a tree. I could reach out and touch a car that would be driving by, but because it's such a traffic calmed environment, they're going really, really slowly. So I would say, yeah, a really rich kind of third place, that could, stretch, I don't know, into the evening even. Maybe the bakeries, the bakery that I have walking distance from my house here, they're shut down and closed by 2 p.m. I'd love to have a place that, I could go and meet a friend either for a coffee or for an adult beverage in the late afternoon, early evening for sure.
Yeah, I like that. Ethan.
If I were to go with a place that was, on my street, really, I'm gonna have to go with the sandwich shop. I absolutely adore sandwich shops. Nothing better than a quick lunch like that in a place where you can, sit down, have that third place, or, have the opportunity to take it to go with you and head back home. And I think that sandwich shops do a really good job of doing both those things. So I'm going with the sandwich shop.
I sense a trend happening here. We must all be getting hungry.
Oh, you know what? Actually, so
What do you think, Nick? Yeah, definitely.
Nick's gonna break the mold and say laundromat or something.
Oh,
maybe I've got something different here
Okay.
from Jen. Jen in the chat, which by the way, you can join the live chat during these shows as a Patreon subscriber. But Jen says, "I'd like a good old arcade, pinball machines, and pool tables."
Yeah.
I like that. That's
fun.
That is a good one.
Activity.
Yeah. Okay, Nick, round us out here.
I'm so spoiled.
You have all those things.
I'm like, oh yeah, like a bakery, but there's like 1 block and a half away, and there's like cafes everywhere. There's a street 2 blocks away that has all these restaurants, but I got one, and it combines 2 things I absolutely love: board game cafe. I would love to have that on my block because I love cafes and I love board games, and we don't have any of those near me, so that would be a good one.
Yeah.
I used to live
Yeah.
about a mile away from one. That was really nice, actually.
Oh yeah, so much fun.
Yeah, I think community building thing like that. Ethan bringing up sandwiches does contractually oblige me to bring up Around the Bend, my personal favorite restaurant.
Wait, what's this place? I've never heard of this place.
It's called Around the Bend. It's got soft pretzel sandwiches, all fresh, all made in house. The owner is a cordon bleu trained chef.
All right,
Lived in
we
France for 2
You need
years.
to call them and be like,
He,
okay, guys, you need to start paying us for a sponsorship because we're mentioning you like every other episode.
Oh, every now and then they'll like toss in a free pretzel.
Nice, okay.
With my stuff. So yeah, they know I talk them up. But it is honestly it is so good. Ethan is currently as we speak buying a plane ticket to Calgary so that he can.
This is true.
come
This is
hang
true.
out
I am
with
a sandwich connoisseur, so
It's gonna change your life. It's gonna change your life.
I've had a few life-changing sandwiches, and one more wouldn't hurt.
Yeah. Well, this has been fantastic. I'm really excited that we got to have you on the show, John, and got to get your insights as somebody who is seasoned in this space of micromobility, of human mobility, of active mobility. And with that, I want to ask you one last question, just as we wrap up. Are there any other insights that you want to share with us, and maybe tell us as well where we can go to find you?
Yeah, sure. I guess the one insight I would have is, again, somebody who's kind of long in the tooth, is that one of the things that I've really, really noticed about diving into all this is that, the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. And so, having that spirit of just continuing to learn and be open to listening to other opinions and really being open to diving into issues and reading books on subjects that may not be right in the same area but are tangential to it is really my kind of like, I guess, secret weapon in terms of being able to, or strategy in terms of being able to approach this. Because what we're talking about is that everything's interconnected and everything's very, very complicated, and it's really easy to get kind of like, heads down and narrow vision and not really being open to other opinions. And so that's the one thing, is just be humble on it. Yes, we kind of joke and say, we're kind of know-it-alls and we do it, and we're talking a lot. But at the same time, taking the time, especially with community members and with cities, to really listen more than you're talking and really try to understand where people are coming from and where their pain points are, I think is my one little bit of wisdom as I approach 60 years of age at this point. And then, for finding me, it's go to the YouTube channel. I mean, that's the place to go, Active Towns. I do have a website as well, and the website is a great landing page to all things Active Towns, so activetowns.org. You can sign up for my Patreon there. You can go to the Active Towns store where you can get your own Streets Are for People swag, both shirts and water bottles and all that kind of good stuff, as well as accessing each of the episodes of the podcast as well. And the podcast does go out also on the audio platform. Sometimes it's a little difficult to listen to when we're really talking about visual things, but it's still a good listen, I think. And and just God, it was absolutely a joy to be able to sit and chat with y'all.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, it's been great.
We loved it.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah. Let's wrap up then. Ethan, where can we find you?
Folks, you can find me at Climate in Transit on any platform. I've recently become a little bit more active on Threads, so if y'all want to follow me there, that'd be wonderful. Nick, where can we find you?
You can find me on Instagram, YouTube, or Twitter at Nick the Door. Alex, where can the people find you?
You can find me at Around the Bend.
Got him.
Skitch suggested we do a live episode from Around the Bend. We just might have to. You can find me at Humane Cities on Instagram and YouTube, or Alex Williams YYC on Threads. I'm there sometimes. Take us away, Ethan.
Folks, thank you so much for watching this episode. We really appreciate all your support, and as always, train good, car bad.
2 wheels good.
And feet first.
And hey, this is John signing off by wishing you much activity, health, and happiness. Cheers.